Wonderful. We are live. Well, good evening, welcome, and welcome to our seminar series on affordable housing explained. I'm here with some awesome panelists. My name is Kelvin Ayala, principal at Led by Us and Associates, and we're looking forward to an awesome, engaging conversation today. First and foremost, a little housekeeping. If you're joining us on Facebook Live, feel free to enter questions in the chat as we get on later in the portion of the program. We'll be facilitating some questions right from the audience. Feel free, there's still time to join us live directly on the Zoom. You can go right to ledbyusct.com and register to join us for the Zoom link. Without further ado, let's get started. I'm going to share my screen and just give you a really quick overview of Led by Us and what we do. Well, first and foremost, Led by Us and Associates, we are an economic development consulting firm focused on responsible urban revitalization. We look to empower community stakeholders, doers, and activists with the tools necessary to move forward with community development and opportunities within marginalized neighborhoods. We focus on 3 core building blocks in our economic development strategy. That's community development, business and workforce training development, and small-scale real estate development. These 3 core building blocks we feel are the catalyst for improving communities and a pathway for building sustainable cities. That's a really quick overview of Led by Us. You can follow us at ledbyusct.com. Feel free to follow our Facebook, our Instagram, our LinkedIn pages, and connect with us at any time. So before we start, I wanted to start with just a really quick framework, because we are often hearing the term of affordable housing and what exactly is affordable housing. So I just wanted to start with the premise of affordable housing and then bring it to our panelists, let them introduce themselves and start the conversation. So just for a real quick working definition of what exactly affordable housing is, and we will get more in depth to define it. But affordable housing is defined as a dwelling in which only 30% of the occupant's take-home income is utilized for that housing. So it's very important for us to at least start with a framework of where we are, of what exactly affordable housing is, because too many people misconstrue affordable housing with low-income housing or project housing or subsidized housing in some way, which there are various levels. But the truth is, every single resident in the state of Connecticut needs affordable housing. Regardless of what your income level is, regardless of what town or city you live in, everyone is in need of affordable housing. So without further ado, want to introduce 2 awesome guests that we have today. And I want them to introduce themselves, the organizations they're with, and a little bit about what drives their passion in this work and what it is they do. So first and foremost, I'll start with Ali. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. Thank you, Kelvin. Thanks for having me here. My name's Ali Robinson. I'm the Director of Commercial Lending for the Housing Development Fund, known as HDF. HDF is essentially a nonprofit lender focused on providing financing to help people get into ownership and to help developers build and protect affordable housing. And I've been working with HDF for about 3 years. I have a background in workforce development and small business social enterprise development. And there's just a huge need in this state. Kelvin, I've been delving into some of the data that you mentioned. And in my role at HDF, I manage our multi-family lending pool. And it's a multi-million-dollar pool ready to lend to developers that are willing to integrate some portion of affordable housing into the development that they're working on. Increasingly, the importance of being able to revitalize the existing building stock, particularly in our urban cores. I just learned recently that upwards of 90% of all of the multifamily housing in this state is more than 40 years old. So there's a tremendous need there to revitalize the existing building stock that we have, much less add new building stock to meet the needs of really, the majority of individuals in the state. I think 70% of households, individuals that are employed in the state earn less than $40,000 a year. And when you compare that to the fact that the cost of housing in Connecticut is, close to 50% more than the national average, it's just really kind of crisis conditions, I think, outlining the need for affordable housing. So that's what we focus on at HDF. I know you've got some great questions lined up for us, and I'm really appreciative for this conversation and to learn more about Kelvin and the work that you do as well while we're together. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. And you brought up some key statistics, and Connecticut is not unique to other states in our affordable housing crisis, but we do know there are a lot of challenges here in the state, and we're going to dive into what exactly some of those are, and we'll also talk about what opportunities might exist. So that's something else that we'll be diving into. Kevin, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and let everyone know what you're about.
Thank you very much, Kelvin. My name is Kevin Taylor. As already mentioned, I'm the Executive Director of Neighborhood Housing Services of Waterbury. NHS of Waterbury is a nonprofit HUD certified organization that was founded in 1980 with the mission to build strong neighborhoods and communities of choice through affordable and comprehensive housing development, financial education, and furthering home and community ownership. We serve low to moderate income individuals and families in Waterbury and about 40 plus other communities in Western Connecticut, going all the way up, pretty much everything west of Route 8, all the way up to Torrington and down to Danbury. But the majority of our real estate development regarding affordable housing is focused in Waterbury, along with our community building and engagement. We do financial literacy education. We have landlord education. We have first-time home buyer education. If you're facing a foreclosure, we can work closely with you and your lender to mitigate those circumstances and keep you housed. So in a nutshell, that is what we do at NHS of Waterbury. And a little bit about myself. I'm born and raised here in Waterbury. I have a background in architecture, which is kind of what, in somewhat urban design to some extent as well. And that's what led me into where I am today at Neighborhood Housing Services.
Thanks for that, Kevin. Kevin, you mentioned something that I really liked what you say, because I always hear it from time to time, but it's pretty strong, and maybe you just can expand on it really quickly. But you say housing of choice. You use those words. Can you just expand on that really quickly?
Well, yeah. So the reason why I say that is because, and I usually the complete phrase that I typically use is housing, creating neighborhoods of choice and not circumstance. A lot of times, at least in the neighborhood that we are focused on, which is the North End of Waterbury, which is predominantly Black and Latino. It's just a lot of, pretty much all the social ills and all of the inequality, so forth and so on, is kind of, there's a lot of that going on in the neighborhood, a lot of disinvestment over the years. Housing options are limited. It's just poor quality of housing, either from, definitely from a rental standpoint. And so our goal or our focus is to say, look, right now you're probably in this neighborhood because of various different reasons. Maybe because the rent in that neighborhood is lower than some other neighborhoods, so you have to live there in a sense. Maybe in a sense, because it's predominantly Black and Latino, there's probably some relationship sort of reasons as to why you are there. Family grew up there. The fact that you just kind of want, you maybe want to be around your own people. financial, I already kind of stated financial reasons is one of the reasons. So what we try to do at the end of the day is say, look, every neighborhood that is of a lower income doesn't have to always look the same in a way. And so we can come in here, work with the residents, work with the city of Waterbury, improve the quality of life issues, improve the quality of housing stock that is in the neighborhood, and even improve the quality of options that are there. Different, what I would like to say is a mixed income neighborhood. And so that you're not, you're not there because of certain financial situations that you might have, so forth and so on. But this neighborhood is now a place that you want to be here. You choose to be here because of the things that the neighborhood offers. You're here because the school that is within the neighborhood is a quality school. The teachers are engaged, the principals engaged. The city is investing in this neighborhood. The police officers, the community police officers are part of making this neighborhood a place that you will want to be a part of. So, things along those lines. So that's why I always say, we want to create this place of choice, and not necessarily because of a certain circumstance that may within your life that may have you residing in a particular neighborhood.
Thank you for that awesome explanation. Ali, I know in light of COVID, I mean, we've known we've had challenges with housing and just meeting the supply, or I mean, the demand for quote unquote affordable housing in the state of Connecticut. But now post-COVID and moving forward, I want you to elaborate a little bit, in 2021 and forward, what are key challenges that you see for tackling affordable housing? Why are we not able to build enough housing to keep up with the demand? Maybe you can share from a lending standpoint and as a housing advocate, what exactly are some of those issues that we're facing in the state of Connecticut?
It's a good question. I think it's important to start with the downward pressure that's coming in from this major population shift coming out of New York City, impacting towns up the coast of Connecticut, inland a fair amount. And it's all resulting in downward pressure on the existing building stock. There's particularly because a large percentage of that movement has been higher income, higher net worth individuals that are able to then outbid and effectively outcompete those that would have otherwise been eligible for this housing. So then they're shifting down to the next tier of affordability. So that's just kind of pressure cooker on top of what we were already dealing with on in terms of the homeowner, the first-time homeowner trying to get into a housing that they can afford, that works with their finances. That's driving up real estate valuation. And for affordable housing, from the construction perspective of it, you're looking at the same margins. The developer is typically looking at the same margins from a financial perspective. And when you've got real estate valuation going up, you also have construction expenses going up right now. I just read an article today that lumber, since the start of the pandemic, is up over 200%, 230%. And that's because of DIY, that's because there were slowdowns at the mills. There's a whole bunch of reasons for it, but the cost of building this stuff has gone through the roof. The cost to buy the land to build on it has gone through the roof. And I had a bit of a heartbreaking conversation with a colleague the other day about the fact that there's been a few groups that have done this work historically that have folded recently. And there's been a lot of community organizing that's just run into a lot of barriers. And I know part of what I've been doing is trying to start conversations. It's really important for the individuals and groups that are doing this work to really be, learning from each other, hearing what the needs are and what's needed. But I really do think the challenges I'm an optimist. I'd like to think that they're temporary, and I think that there is, strong opportunity on the heels of them. I know that that's a separate question, so I'll hold there, but I just don't, there are challenges, but I think that we're looking at potentially an opportunity to rise above them in the near future. So I'll leave that there.
Yeah, thanks for that. Kevin, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I can give an example of that. Last year during the summer, in June, we sold a home. We just completed a rehab of a two-family home. We were selling it as a home ownership opportunity with the rental component. It's our mission to keep it affordable, and I believe we had it on the market for about 165. And just as Ali mentioned about the influx of New York buyers coming in, we put it on the market, and within a week, we had 9 offers. All were at least the asking price, and those were the ones coming from those who fell within the affordable, guidelines of 50% of the area median income. But we had about 3 or so New York buyers who were willing to pay $25,000 above the asking price. Now, we couldn't do that, but but someone who is not in the business of creating affordable housing, they would have went for that and would have priced out the individual who was trying to buy the home that fell within that affordable guideline. So another thing I would also say is zoning here in the state of Connecticut is another issue. CT is one of the most racially and economically segregated states in the country, and that's due to a lot of the exclusionary zoning that has fostered this decades. And so I know there's a lot of entities and organizations that are pushing for zoning changes in the various towns. So that's an issue. Ali did mention land cost is another issue. And so I will leave it at that. I think that for the most part, everything's been touched upon.
I think you guys hit on some clutch points, and just the cost, the barrier of entry for developers. I say it all the time when people come to me for consultant help on projects, and we talk about Fairfield County, where I'm in the greater Bridgeport market. However, there's opportunities in Norwalk, Stamford. But I tell people all the time, the cost of building is the same in Darien, Westport, and Wilton as it is to build in the city of Bridgeport. And the difference is the market rate. The market rate of what housing you can generate on rent from a multifamily development in Bridgeport is not the same as what you can get for that same development in another town, or let's say even Norwalk or Stamford, who get to aggregate from its proximity closer to New York City. So market rate, it plays a huge role. And Ali hit it right out the park on the first part of the question, is that this influx of new people entering the real estate market have really shifted the tables on us. It turned us upside down. And unless you already had a multifamily development with an affordable housing component already in the works, it's very difficult to jump into something now, because now real estate property values, land value is through the roof. And if for agencies like Kelvin with Neighborhood Housing Services, where you're a nonprofit, you can't afford to pay top dollar for land that you want to develop that's going to have a social good. So I appreciate those answers. So moving on, knowing that the adequate housing supply is a catalyst for vibrant communities, can we talk a little bit more about how important is having housing stability? When we talk about community development and we're talking about making our community safe and bringing amenities into the community and improving the quality of life, I always say it starts with adequate housing, and housing that people are comfortable with and want to be in. Kind of what Kevin's saying, housing of choice. How important is that stability, Ali, for people to be able to know, hey, this is where I call home?
So I mean, you hit the key point there, Kelvin. The housing is one of, from what I understand, one of the single most determining factors, indicators of health, and the drivers with education, and the really vital connections that you're able to make with your community, with your neighbors. And when you have situations where households are having to constantly shift their location, just to be able to meet the rising demands of that rental rate, it's really the impacts, particularly on kids. I mean, I went to an event last year. A superintendent of one of our public school systems was sharing heartbreaking stories about, the outreach he ends up doing and the support that he ends up offering community members in his school district. And so as a mom, that's something that it's really critical for our foundation, for our neighborhoods, for the relationships. I think from, I guess, the other part of my brain, the financial and structural part of things, it's really important for the municipalities. It's important for our government to work, and it's important for to be able to ensure that employees can live near their employers, that small businesses can hire people without having to ask them to travel 2 hours to be able to get to work. So small businesses benefit. Municipalities benefit from the tax revenue that comes from the local businesses. So there's, local commerce, there's a lot. I know I'm not doing it justice, but those are, the big ones that come to mind.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. Kelvin, same question. How do you feel from your end in the greater Waterbury area? You guys do a ton of community development work to kind of stabilize opportunities for self-resiliency for folks. Can you touch a little bit more on that as well?
Yeah, I would say definitely from a neighborhood stabilization standpoint, stable housing is critical. First and foremost, you reduce the transient population in a particular neighborhood, and when people are stable, it's definitely essential to the health and well-being, not only of the household or the individuals, but even the neighborhood. People being a part of a neighborhood for a long period of time helps foster relationships and various opportunities in communities, and from a health standpoint, it definitely limits chronic stress. Moving frequently, and in some cases, people are moving frequently in and out of shelters. They may be in a house, a home, or apartment in one particular month or year, and then they're uptick in rent or something along those lines, loss of income, and they can find themselves in a shelter. And then, the other thing I would say what is critical to housing stability is the discretionary income. So, when you go back and you talk about, what is affordable housing, and, in the definition you gave is 30% of your income, no more than 30% of your income is going towards rent or mortgage. So here in the state of Connecticut, in order to kind of meet that, your hourly wage needs to be $25.40. And that's sort of the livable wage here in the state of Connecticut. And now, affordable, or what is deemed affordable can vary from city to city. What's deemed affordable here in Waterbury is totally different what is deemed affordable in Westport, let's say. And so these thresholds are a little bit arbitrary. And so, like, a perfect example of that is if the concept of behind this whole area median income can exaggerate the affordability of housing in high income areas. So, for instance, they like New York or Washington D.C., and we'll say D.C. the area median, the median income in there in D.C. is maybe around $100,000 or so, which means that a family of 3 at 50% of that AMI is going to fall somewhere around the upper 40,000s, and that and is considered low income for housing affordability purposes. But that means that a unit could qualify as affordable for a low-income family while still being well outside the price range of a family living near the poverty line. And so the fact that many high-income households that live in DC areas does not magically like make mid-price houses affordable to that city's actual low-income residents. So by basing affordability on these sort of metrics on the local median income implies that when housing affordability gets so dismal that low-income people leave, your city actually increased the affordability of its housing stock, if I'm making sense with that. And so if I'm able to spend less of my income on housing, then I have a lot of discretionary income that can be used towards other things, which people who are house burdened have to make some difficult decisions, such as, healthcare. Do they have enough money to deal with healthcare, or even their basic needs?
Basic
am I
needs,
gonna have
food, your
to-
utilities. Correct.
Yeah, utilities, all that. Am I going to be able to afford some groceries this year? Do I got to not this year, but this particular week? Do I got to decide on paying some utility costs versus my or going towards food expense? So if we can reduce the number of households burdened here in the state of Connecticut, that means just more discretionary income that can be used towards one's health, towards additional educational support for their children, music lessons, retirement, more money that can go into retirement or go toward saving and a chat account for their kids' college tuition, things along that line. So
yeah, you bring up some great points, Kevin. I think for me, one of the biggest things that always comes about is it reduces stress levels, the anxiety of not being able to provide for your family, your mental health, your well-being. That alone has improves quality of life. And so stable housing is very important. And the more affordable we can make it, whether it's through subsidies or just increasing supply in the pipeline, or increasing the or bettering the housing stock. So there's a lot of roles that are being played, and there's a lot of players, whether they're from the private sector, where you have real estate developers, you have municipalities. Ali brought up local government and what they need to do in order to foster some activity around housing development. I want to shift gears a little bit. What impact, because we often hear about, a lot of times when people think affordable housing, they think of low income housing, or right away they think of their local housing authority, which does play a massive role. Large cities like your Danbury, your Waterbury, your Norwalk, your Stamford, Bridgeport, New London, Hartford's all have housing authorities, and they probably responsible for 4,000 to as much as 10,000 families. And that's just the tip of the iceberg in a large city. They might account for maybe 10% of the housing stock, but they have a large reach. I had a question for you, Ali. I'll have you start. Kind of what impact, if any, do you feel perceptions about welfare, housing vouchers, or this concept of old school housing projects, do you feel they've impacted new developments throughout the state? We hear a lot of right now happening in the state regarding zoning reform. We have exclusionary zoning, and I don't want to take a deep dive into zoning laws, because I have strong feelings of what poor zoning has done to us to exacerbate this problem. But perceptions about low income housing and low moderate income tenants, how do you feel that has impacted getting real estate developments off of the ground that's going to benefit or contribute some affordable housing units?
I would go so far as to say that community misconceptions and misdefinitions about what affordable housing looks like, who is in need of it, and how it impacts our communities is one of the biggest barriers toward fixing this problem and solving this problem. I've been reading up on this missing middle concept recently. And I think, you can kind of come at this topic from a few ways, kind of from the building stock perspective. What does it look like? And I think, to your point, people think it's those massive brick shoeboxes that were built in the 60s and 70s, and just the disconnect with communities that they facilitated. And on the other hand, we've got these, 2 to 5 unit multi-unit properties that have beautiful architecture and are aesthetically integrated and improving their neighborhoods, and have front porches so you can meet your neighbors and you can integrate, and it's, I think that, so the figures that Kevin was sharing about DC are really close to what I understand to be Connecticut's numbers, in that for someone to qualify for affordable housing, that's literally like 70% of working individuals in this state essentially meet the requirement to some extent, depending on where you're living. But it's a huge majority of the state qualifies for some degree of affordability. In terms of how you're defining it, that's the issue. And there's a lot of public pushback. You hear horror stories about things that are said at public hearings, and the things that you read about that, individuals put their names behind, and really just broad sweep, detrimental, really harmful misconceptions about all of it.
Yeah. You hit on some strong points, and these are sensitive topics because we're vilifying people for systemic practices that have put us in this situation, and just the housing crisis and kind of the way housing and land itself in the state of Connecticut is kind of overvalued in a way, and everyone can play a part. But we almost have to grab the bull by the horns because it's starting to get out of control. And I would hate Connecticut to get to crisis level like what we see in Los Angeles County, where affordable housing in Los Angeles, a single family home considered affordable at $680,000. That's an insane number, but we're slowly creeping up there. So I think there are things that we can do in the state of Connecticut, and one of them is bringing down those perceptions and getting a handle of and getting a better handle on that misinformation throughout. And towns there's policy work that needs to be done, advocacy work from agents, from agencies such as yours, and I think developers need to do a better job. Our firm, led by us, we work with several real estate development agencies, and hire us. You need community and civic action teams to get on the ground. We can help dispel a lot of those myths and really circle back and tie in what community development is looking like, or how that makes an impact. Because when we look at some of these larger multifamily projects and we talk about the public realm and we want to introduce some community benefits, whether it's open public space or housing that's along the waterfront, and we want to recapture waterfront and be able to make it accessible for residents throughout the city. In essence, that planning that the developer is doing, they're planning their own mini community. And we need to make sure that we're tying those aesthetics with everything else around the community. So I don't want to take a dive into the words of gentrification, but I feel gentrification really doesn't happen unless we allow it. And it starts with planning, and we have to make sure that we meet these development plans and incorporate housing options within the realm of the people who live there. And we create opportunities for all. It is about upward mobility and economic empowerment. And we could do that through housing, because housing automatically leads itself, and we mentioned it earlier, it leads itself to better health and the health opportunities and education. And ultimately people raising families and neighborhoods. Kevin, you want to jump in a little bit on some of those misconceptions?
Yeah, so coming from an architecture standpoint, which is one of the reasons why I got involved in this, is, you know, as Ali mentioned, you know, it's the square with the hat on top of it. That's what people view it as. There's no architectural details or aesthetics to the building in whatsoever. And so, I mean, Kelvin, you're a little familiar with some of the projects we're working on, but, you know, we're pushing that envelope to some extent to have some really exciting, modern, architecturally designed homes within the community that we're focused in. So yeah, unsightly buildings is definitely a perception, and to some extent, you know, it's a reality. And so we as developers need to you know, to address that and change it. The other thing people always talk about is density. You know, there's going to be larger families coming in here, and it's going to be a burden to our schools and our roads, and our property values are going to go down, and our crime rate is going to go up. So there's a lot of all those misconceptions that are out there. But I'm not the best to speak on it. You know, Sean Gio of that Partnership for Strong Community is really great at speaking to communities about these misconceptions or perceptions. And I've been on a couple of calls with him, you know, out in Southbury, speaking to the community about the importance of affordable housing. And I would just say, you know, once again, if I work at Stop and Shop and Middlebury or Southbury, let's say, that's affordable. You know, affordable housing is definitely needed. I can't necessarily, I can't afford to buy 2 acres of land and put a home on it at a cost of $300,000+. So going back to talking about people, which Ali mentioned about the benefit of the retailers, being able to have your employees work right, you know, live in the same town that they work in. You know, if I'm fresh out of college, I grew up in Southbury and I want to live there because I grew up there and I like the town, and I don't necessarily want to stay, you know, in the same house or under the same roof as my parents. I'm going to need a place to live. But once again, not being able to afford, and not having the income to afford a single family home in Southbury is going to cause me to move somewhere else, and possibly move out of the state, which is one of the reasons why we're losing a lot of our younger residents. So yeah, those are definitely some of the I would just add as far as some of the perceptions.
Those are really cool. I appreciate those points, Kevin. Hey, Ali, I'm going to come back to something you said that I thought was cool, and Kevin, you'll appreciate this from the architectural standpoint. You know, we need to bring back the front porch. You know, the front porch, the stoop, as we used to say, growing up in the east side of Bridgeport, or anyone who's been raised in the urban element. The front porch was the community spot, right? It's like you have the sidewalk, depending who you listen to, it's yours. It belongs to the municipality, but the front porch was yours. But that was the engagement, the congregation, the can I borrow sugar, communal spot. And I think we need to bring back more front porches and the aesthetics of some of the developments that we're building, because that's how we get communities to build, and how we get back to walkable communities, the sustainability of cities, specifically the inner cities here in the state of Connecticut. So I heard you bring that up, and it resonated, because I really think that we should at all times, especially with smaller developments or rehabilitation of housing, our 2-family, our 3-family homes, of trying to bring back outside decks or those front stoops and porches. Is there anything you want to add to that, Ali?
I mean, I shared that from personal experience when I moved to Bridgeport, moving back to Connecticut after being in California for a decade. That's how I met a lot of my neighbors. My husband's usually sitting on the stoop, and I was usually sitting on my chair right next to him on the porch. And we met a lot of neighbors, and it helped. Then you'd see familiar faces at the farmers market, and it's just. I am not quoting studies on this. I haven't kept up with the reading, but I do know that there's going back to the stress and the mental health and the physical well-being of individuals, having outdoor communal space and centers of community is so important. So I'm biased for sure in that I think it's an important characteristic of design of this
Yeah,
type of
I
building.
think we miss out on it, especially in like downtown living. We go vertical and we build these high rises, or we call luxury housing, and yeah, you build in some amenities in public spaces, but nothing can compete with the front porch, in my opinion. So moving on. So we discuss a lot of challenges to affordable housing, whether it's the cost to developers, the cost of materials, just the aspects of getting community buy-in, the misperceptions. I wanted to reverse gears and talk about, well, what opportunities are there out there for the listening audience? I'm big on community advocacy. I'm big on social impact investing. We preach that here, led by us. How do we get the average community stakeholder, business owner, investor to start contributing in this space? Where a developer may not want to take on something that might not be 20 units or larger. There's the reality is that there are many more opportunities for small impact investors to take on rehabilitating a 2-family home or a 3-family or something smaller. Or if you have a vacant parcel of land next to your home, as an abutter, just contact your city. You have rights to ownership to try and get that property. And start looking at opportunities. So I wanted to share with the listening audience some concepts such as crowdfunding, incremental development, and other opportunities for small scale real estate development. But I wanted to turn to you guys as advocates in the affordable housing spaces. How do you feel that the average stakeholder, community doer, the average community investor can get involved to help a little bit get us out of an affordable housing crisis in Connecticut, but also expand on opportunities and launch themselves towards some economic empowerment and self-resiliency? Kev, I'll let you take the first word on this one.
Well, Kelvin, Kelvin, that's a tough one, honestly, because doing this professionally is tough. Trying to figure out the capital stack that's needed to put the financing to put these projects together, which sometimes consist of, we probably average about 4 different sources of funding at a minimum. And when we're talking about just rehabbing a 3-family home and the amount of cost that it takes to do so. So, Kelvin, I honestly don't know to address that from a resident standpoint. I will say this, though, that there is a lot of old housing stock out there. And as we mentioned earlier, the cost right now is, has gone up. So it may not necessarily be the right time to look into purchasing one of those homes, unless you can, maybe be on a foreclosure or possibly do a tax auction. And hopefully, there's not any crazy bidders in there shooting these prices up.
Yeah, I think
but I would
definitely
yeah, I would definitely say, at least starting next year, hopefully we'll assume that in 2022, things will be more in the buyer's favor. And then once again, there's a lot of vacant lots out there just as well, as you mentioned, reaching out to the city if there's a vacant lot next to your home, reaching out to the city and seeing if this is something that you can acquire, and either at a means of attaching it to your property or being able to develop it later down the road. And I would just say, from a developer standpoint in the nonprofit sector, this this new American Rescue Plan Act that the president passed, that the federal government passed, is a huge opportunity down the road for the affordable housing arena. So I don't know the exact number, and I apologize, but there's a lot of funding that's coming down the pike here in the state of Connecticut, and definitely in the city of Waterbury, for strictly for affordable housing, to increase the amount of affordable housing in the state of Connecticut, and then even from the education and counseling side, there's going to be a lot of funding. So I would just say those are some of the, the old housing stock and vacant lots, and then of course these dollars that are coming for the federal government to help with the affordable housing issue are some opportunities moving forward.
Yeah, I appreciate you mentioned too the American Rescue Plan and dollars coming in. And I encourage people, if you're a current homeowner or you're a current landlord, you own some property, check with your local town and municipality. There's something called home loans, which are opportunities for existing homeowners to get funding to improve their housing stock or improve their property. And these are federally funded programs, typically through HUD. And it's administered through your local community development or your local planning office. But pretty much every town gets some type of funding under what's called home loans, which are typically to help attack affordable housing and make sure that we keep people in their dwelling units that they own. And a lot of times these funds are there to help offset the costs of improving your home. Another thing that I'll always
Kelvin, I just want to add real quick that that word loan is forgivable. So
it is forgivable. Yeah. So definitely, guys, check into your local town and see what they have. I know most major cities have individuals who are specialists in that area. That funding is just not available to nonprofits or private developers. Some of the funding is available to homeowners. And also look for funding that can help with reducing lead or lead paint or other things that could be wrong within your home just because of aging. That financially is kind of out of the scope of what you can do. But again, these are opportunities for you to improve the housing stock that you own, as well as make it a better living situation to maintain and retain your current tenants. Ali, is there any last words you want to say on that before we take some Q&A from the audience?
Yeah, and my disclaimer is I'm in my silo as a lender, and we have funds to lend. And one of my biggest frustrations is that we have these funds to lend. Why they're not all out the door, because of how great the need is it keeps me up at night. And what I find increasingly is that the barrier is we need financial guarantors, and we need supports for developers to be able to have cash at closing that's required, so that you're not, as a developer, having to go out and find 4 or 5 different sources of financing. So my kind of pie in the sky ideal would be a community fund that's able to basically identify a developer that's trusted and is able to pool financial backing to help get that developer to the closing table. Making sure that there's a strong team and that there's really strong foundation of trust there. But oftentimes, unfortunately, what I find is that the developer that has the vision might not necessarily have the net worth behind them that's required to build this type of housing. So in terms of opportunities for impact investors, for community advocates, is an organization like HDF as a CDFI, community development financial institution, we can lend up to 90% of the property value or the total cost. But there's a huge barrier for developers trying to do this housing to bring in that remaining piece. So that's my final word. That's my daydream. If we could be able to kind of bring that together, I would love to be part of those conversations.
I appreciate that. So I just want to bring up a question from the audience. John Campbell asked, will green energy trends shift housing markets back to the cities and away from the suburbs, since the trend is shifting from gasoline-powered cars? And it just kind of follows up, in what way does, I guess, transit-oriented development play a role with the housing choices and options that are coming across? But kind of the advocacy of us starting to build and not being so vehicle driven and accommodating for vehicles. That we didn't really touch on it, what the challenges of parking minimums do to real estate development. Does anyone want to give a go on just the understanding of green energy and what those trends are doing to maybe drive costs down or get people from suburbs back into cities and change that demand for housing?
Well, I know from our standpoint, we look at the renewable energy as a way to reduce homeowners' costs. So when we talk about this 30% of their income being paid towards rent and mortgage and trying to create more discretionary income, we look into solar power in all of our home ownership opportunities that we are doing to decrease their utility costs and increase the amount of dollars that they're able to save and to use towards other things. As far as it dragging people back in from the suburbs to the cities, I guess it plays a certain part. I know the state is big on locating affordable housing near train stations and so forth. The only thing I would say, once again, I push hard for the urban communities and communities that consist of Black and brown people. What seems to take place is that as we apply for this type of funding from the state, that there are more points going towards transit-oriented development, and there's more points going towards the suburbs. I would just hope that we would stay focused on the neighborhoods, or put more of a focus on the neighborhoods that have not seen much investment in many of years, and so that we, that this money that should be going to some of these Black and brown communities are not being pushed for opportunities in the suburbs and opportunities near railroad stations. So I would leave it at that.
Thanks for that. There's another question from Seth. I don't want to dive too much into it. We did not talk about it, but he brought something up. And Ali and Kevin, both of you guys are very familiar with LIHTC, or our low-income housing tax credits. And they are a big tool, one of the largest tools we've used for the last 3 decades around the country to help and assist complete equity stacks for affordable housing. And recently, there's been a lot of news and uproar of the way that these third-party markets are being handled for the tax credits, where you have banks who purchased the tax credits initially, and now you have big hedge funds or REITs or other institutions that are now buying these tax credits on the back end of these housing developments. And I see it happening in Boston and Los Angeles, where you have affordable housing complexes who met their covenants of about 15 years for those tax credits. And rather than being able to buy out the notes or those tax credits to fully own the properties, they are now being asked to sell those affordable housing units or come up with larger sums than was originally in the pact. I don't know how much you guys have heard about this stuff, but it's starting to become a crisis nationwide and an attack, if you will, on low-income housing tax credits, which I feel has probably been one of the most utilized tools to get affordable housing out the ground. We know it's not perfect, but this crisis happening right now that's developed over the last few months, that's kind of the question Seth has brought up. Ali, I don't know from a funding standpoint if you're aware or know anything about said topic at all.
I might be asking for some articles from you. I know very little about this issue of secondary markets for, LIHTC credits. I do know that what I've seen over the past 3 years at HDF is increasingly the developers that are interested in taking on these smaller scale multifamily units that we're financing are early enough in their careers, have small enough administrative support, and have limited enough history behind them that it almost seems like the LIHTC market is benefiting a different type of developer, if you will, and that the developers that have the organizational capacity and the sophistication to access those LIHTC's tax credits are typically focused on those larger scale developments where they can maximize the returns on that initial investment. So I know that even on the front end, there are significant barriers for developing the type of housing that we're talking about. I'm not surprised to hear about the issues on the back end with the secondary market. I think you run into that anytime there's financial vehicles that can be traded and upsold and exchanged. But I know very little about it, Kelvin, and I hope you don't mind my request that you share an article or two on it, because I'm intrigued. I'd love to learn more.
I will. I'll get back to you guys. And again, this has been a pleasant conversation, talk on a very complex topic of affordable housing here in the state of Connecticut, the crisis, the challenges, the misconceptions, and all the different things and facets that make this type of work challenging yet rewarding. Being able to help families impact their future and have equitable access to opportunities is huge. And I think we all play a role in that, in the economic development field, planning field, architectural fields, public policy. We all play a role. Community stakeholders, you play a role as well. Look into your zoning, your local zoning laws. Bridgeport, for example, is finishing up some rewrites right now that are in its first draft in infancy. But I'm a big advocate of reducing and getting rid of parking minimums. Hartford, Connecticut did this about a year or two ago, and I think it's great for development. This concept that we need to accommodate parking for everyone. We're talking about affordable housing. If people can barely afford to live there, what makes you think they have a vehicle, they want to pay insurance, property taxes, and gas to get around? So this concept that we're not getting enough housing supply up in the air because of parking requirements is insane to me. So definitely there's opportunities for people to get involved in their community, get a better understanding. If you're a current homeowner and you have land, look into accessory dwelling units. Most towns around Connecticut have been looking or changing ordinances or their zoning laws to accommodate ADUs. These are small dwellings that are available, and you know what? You get together with your family owner, your family, your brothers, your sisters, pull some resources together, and go ahead and build that small dwelling unit right on your lot. And maybe someone, maybe one of your children can live there for a few years. Maybe it becomes somewhere where an older family member can go to, and eventually it become an opportunity to get some rental income. So there are opportunities that can help impact affordable housing. It requires creativity, no different than Kevin Taylor at Neighborhood Housing Services when they get creative on finding equity and different funding to make projects work. No different than Ali when you try to get projects funded and you're trying to get clients qualified. You're getting very creative in the underwriting process to make sure that we're giving thumbs up and not giving traditional no's in the marketplace. So once again, I really applaud your efforts in the affordable housing space. I'm very happy and excited to have you guys. And I'll just let you guys get off some final words. Ali?
Yes, thank you for having us. It's such an important conversation. I feel honored to be here learning from both of you and the work that you've been doing. And it's validating, frankly. And I think that's the downside of this pandemic and working remotely and just having the importance of having conversations like this to really shift the focus on what's the opportunity that we have ahead of us here and how can we establish partnerships and relationships toward these shared goals that ultimately benefit all of us. So thank you.
Thank you. And Kevin, last words?
Yeah, thank you just as well for inviting Allie and I to be a part of this conversation. I definitely will be calling Allie tomorrow regarding some of that funding that she has financing, so we can get some of these projects off the ground. And Kelvin, as I stated to you earlier, you know, you hold a special place in my heart because I had to leave my kids' track and field meet today to be a part of this call. But I you know, I enjoyed it. It was worth it, and yeah, I enjoy working with you just as well. Thank you.
No, man, much appreciated. It's great having subject matter experts in a room who can talk eloquently at the challenges in front of us, but we bring solutions to the table. For everyone listening on Facebook Live, follow Led by Us at ledbyusct.com. You can follow Mr. Kelvin Taylor at nhswaterbury.org and Allie Robinson if you want to learn more about Housing Development Fund and some of the amazing work that they're doing, hdfconnects.org. Check them out. Once again, thank you for joining us. And it was an honor and privilege to host this webinar, and we hope everyone got something out of it. Thanks for coming.